Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 304 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. It's where you can also find out more about my book, Be Like the Best, and the Be Like the Best workbook. The book consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that'll help you be like the best. Go to ContinueFit.com or BeLikeTheBest.com to check that out. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about speaking in absolutes. He did a coach's minute on Instagram about that one. The orthopedic cost of exercise, and specifically for trap bar deadlifts. Also spoke about his article, Why We've Moved Away from Bars, and basically asking him if squat racks are even necessary at this point in his gym. All right, for the Naamly Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on Tim Caron. Tim is the co-owner of Allegiate Gym in Redondo Beach, California. He's a former West Point football strength and conditioning coach, contributes a lot on the StrengthCoach.com forum, and wanted to get him on just to kind of talk about, one, his article and from his podcast that he's been doing, a quality control, a case study, and there's some really good stuff in there. He talks about advice when you're taking over a new job and some things that he did at West Point, so it's kind of cool. How to focus on range of motion and how it can lead to a more discipline for your athletes. We talked about leaving the team setting. He's getting a lot of questions from coaches who really want to leave like a college atmosphere, pro atmosphere, and open up their own place, which for me is kind of interesting just because of the climate right now. And we talked about what they've done at Allegiate to keep folks engaged over the last close to a year now with pretty much the shutdown. Naamly, our sponsor, is the member experience platform for modern training gyms. It helps you build lasting relationships with your members so they stay longer and pay longer. It's an incredible tool that really puts all of your communication with your members in one place. You don't want to do this stuff, on your phone, texting, and then you're doing something else through email. This allows you to keep track of all your communication, which, by the way, is really important for retention. And I say it a lot. We hear so much about marketing, but rarely do we hear about retention. And this is the tool that will help you build lasting relationships with your members so they stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com. That's Naamly, Naamly.com. You can schedule a demo. It's what I did. You'll get a feel for what they can do and what you can do with this incredible tool. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. All right, for the TrainHeroic data-driven coaching segment, Tim Robinson and Adam Dawdy discuss foundations of online marketing, focusing on the big rocks. Don't forget, Coach Boyle and I both use TrainHeroic to deliver all of our online training, and they have plans that start as low as $10 a month, depending on how many people you have. They also have a free 14-day trial. They do a great job of ramping you up as well. Mention that I sent you, and you'll get a 4-week athlete development program into your account absolutely free. It's one of Coach Boyle's, so it'll kind of give you a head start into a good feel for what you can do with the app. So if you're a coach looking for the best online training solution in the game, go to TrainHeroic.com and take your free 14-day trial. For the Certified Functional Strength Coach segment with Brendon, Rearick, and Kevin Carr, today's show, Kevin continues the 7-part series on movement as medicine. This is part 6, and he's going to talk about exercise and cognitive health. This stuff is really good to kind of go over with some clients, especially your adult clients, for some buy-in. For the Fit to Speak segment with Jenny Rearick, she continues her 4-part series on the 4 elements of great communication. Today, she's going to talk about the importance of an organized message when communicating, and she's going to introduce a framework that you can start using today. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try it out for 30 days. Just the buck. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions. Check it out at strengthcoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ann. How are you?
All right, hanging in. A lot of activity on the site lately, and you've been doing some more Instagram coaches minutes. I think we'll tie some of those things in. I actually want to start out with the don't speak in absolutes, which is always kind of that seems kind of funny to me that somebody would complain about that. But can you give us an example of like what are they complaining about that you're talking in absolutes?
I think anytime I say don't do something or I don't agree with someone, it's funny. I answer on Instagram, but it's primarily on Twitter that people really get mad about the fact that I will take a stance like, oh, we never do that kind of thing, or we always do this. And it's amazing how often, I would say almost every time I make one of those statements, I get someone coming back like, you're always speaking in absolutes. You're always using words like always and never. And I'm like, yeah, that's because I always do it that way and I never do it the other way.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting because what it really comes down to, and I think it's very typical of kind of our national climate right now, it's if you don't agree with me, then you speak in absolutes. Do you know what I mean? Like whoever you are on social media, if I disagree with you, then it becomes my problem and my fault and I should fix my behavior. And I kind of look at it and think it's just interesting. I had a long talk with Jonas Dodu on Skype maybe a month ago. And one of the things that he said, because this kind of topic came up, and he said, yeah, people are really afraid of your opinion. He said, because it carries a lot of weight. So when you say that we do this and we only do this, the people who are on the other side of that get all freaked out because they think that that it's going to hurt their position, I guess.
Yeah, it is funny. And I even told you this when we were talking about our interview with Bobby Stroop last week. I think you were worried like, hey, Ant, I don't want Bobby to think like we're ganging up on him or something. And I said, one thing with you is when somebody talks to you, when they hear your voice, and this is why I think the podcast has obviously been so popular besides my incredible interviewing, is that once they hear your voice, they kind of get it. They hear when you explain it. When you go see Mike Boyle in person, you understand that there's other things that he's doing, that there's things that aren't really in the absolutes. And I think that's part of the problem with social media is that this, 280 characters and they think they know you, but they don't really know you. But I think once they hear you, and that's why I always bring this stuff up back on the podcast, is to kind of give you a chance to kind of expand a little bit on it. Because even with Instagram, it's 1 minute, and people think, okay. But it's funny. It reminds me of the Thomas Myers start of his lecture the first time at Perform Better. Look, 50% of what I'm going to tell you right now is wrong. The problem is, I don't know which 50%, so it's like you said, it's just what we're doing now, what we believe in. We believe it's the best way. So I wouldn't say that's absolute. Maybe it's absolute for the time. Yeah, but it's for the time being, but it doesn't mean you can't change.
Exactly. I jokingly say to people all the time, I believe I'm right up to the moment I realize I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it's supposed to be. But it just is interesting because I kind of jot these things down now in my notes in my phone for the kind of Coaches Minutes videos, like, okay, things to talk about. And one of the things I had written 3 different notes about speaking in absolutes. And I said, I guess this is one I should address because it is, as I said, to me, it's really interesting that the people who are saying you shouldn't speak in absolutes are basically on the other side of the issue, and they're they're doing the exact same thing. It's just that they don't agree with what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I think, and the hard part too about social media is, and I've said this before, I feel like don't post something on social media if you're not prepared to defend it, because I feel like, this isn't, and even I think Instagram is different. Instagram is more like, hey, look, here's a picture of me and my dog. You know what I mean? Like, great. I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't like your dog. Your dog's black and white. I don't like that. I think you should get one that's a different color, but when you post things like someone posted today on Twitter something about like, knees over toes, absolutely non-debatable, the way to go. And I posted back, actually, no, very debatable. Look at the research on patellofemoral pain, and everybody will tell you that you really want to control the movement of the knees over your toes. It's a very debatable topic. And the kid actually handled it really well. He responded, politely, yeah, I didn't, I probably shouldn't have, I overgeneralized, whatever. But other people get really offended that you disagree with them. And I kind of look and think, like, don't you figure that when you post this, there's going to be a percentage of people that disagree with you? And then it goes back to the thing like, oh, it's different. It's Mike Boyle that disagrees with you. That's different. And I'm kind of like, why? Like, I don't get to disagree because, and then people like, oh, coaches calling each other out on Twitter is unprofessional. I'm thinking, why are the coaches on Twitter? If you're not willing to take some risk that someone might not agree with you and might engage you in, maybe a spirited debate, I don't know what the point is. It's not like it's not TikTok. It's not like a look at me medium.
Yeah. I will say, I tell people all the time, like, what they don't understand, strength coaches, there is a lot of conversation with strength coaches. It's a good place to be for strength coaches. Twitter, Instagram, a little different. And, anybody ever tells me that Emma should be a different color, we got problems. But, but it is true though. There is a lot of conversation on Twitter. So I think all strength coaches. That's why we say like follow Coach Boyle on Twitter, because all of the Instagram stuff goes to Twitter anyway. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of great conversations on there. But I think look, I think for young coaches or any coaches, it's like, hey, this is your opportunity to actually change Boyle's mind, because it has been done before. I think Tony Holler that was a Twitter thing, right? Was it the first time you were on Twitter, you realized about, or, kind of heard about Tony?
I would say I met or I became aware of Tony on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I started reading Tony's articles on Twitter, and I started, that's what led me to like, hey, I need to get this guy out to speak, at a staff meeting. I need to spend some time with him where I can, get a longer exposure to his thought process.
Yeah. Coach, I want to, you wrote an article, The Orthopedic Cost of Exercise, a while back, and there was a thread that kind of reemerged from it. I thought it was a great question by Eric Skane. And he asked, and it makes sense based on all of your other philosophies. Have you switched solely to skater deadlifts because the orthopedic cost of lifting the relatively high weights that come with a trap bar deadlift compared to the skater deadlift? So all the logic you use, and I know you don't have a load on your back, but all the logic you use for the rest of those bilateral exercises doesn't seem to apply for the trap bar deadlift. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, one, I think we do that with our adult clients. Like our adult clients, as a general rule, do not bilateral deadlift. Our athletes still do. And the major reason they do is we just haven't seen the orthopedic cost. Like, so if you looked at me and said squatting, what's the orthopedic cost? I'd be like, wow, you're going to ding up 20% of your backs like that. The orthopedic cost, in that particular lift runs in the, there's going to be like a 20% breakage kind of rate in there. We just haven't seen that with trap bar deadlift. And I've talked about this in a couple of different environments that I don't know whether I've done it on the podcast or not. But one, when you're thinking about deadlifts, you've got what your low back is doing is it's creating an extension moment to hold itself in place. So, you're not like in squatting, you place yourself in extension and then you balance the load on your spine. In other words, you put the load at the top and you have to create some arch and create some, some column solidity, whatever, to be able to kind of, balance that bar. When you go to a trap bar deadlift, the bar is in your hands and now you're being pulled into flexion. So what you do is you're producing extension forces and flexion moments to hold that bar in position. And that's, I think they're really different in terms of how the back responds to those. The other thing that happens, I always talk about the idea, it's basically torque, shear, and compression that I don't like about squatting. Obviously, compression is gone. And if we think about torque, the trap bar is 5 feet long versus 7 feet long, and the plates are about probably 3 feet apart, maybe 3.5 feet apart, versus on the standard Olympic bar, they're about 5 feet apart. So the torque production capability of the Olympic bar is significantly higher than the torque production capability of the trap bar. And then when we think about shear, same idea, the load being up, on your shoulders, at that like whatever C7, T1 kind of area, now gives you some shear production capability because the position of the load relative to your center of mass is significantly different. You've created a long lever arm there that you don't get again with trap bar deadlifting, because that, it's almost like the load kind of stays in your pockets almost based on where your hands are. So I think there's a lot of things that lower the orthopedic cost of the trap bar deadlift. And it's funny, I was looking at that thread. I have to write that answer in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, or you could write, I just answered that on the Strength Coach Podcast, episode 304.
When will that be up?
It'll probably, hopefully by Monday. So yeah, it's a little late.
Yeah. Maybe I'll say, okay, Eric, by Monday, you'll have your answer.
For a more detailed.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, one thing too is I think with that, being older, obviously, I like a straight bar deadlift, but I really like the trap bar deadlift. And I will say, never mind the back, I never have any problems with my knees on trap bar deadlifts either. And I've had some history with my knees. So I've never, but a front squat, don't really do too many back squats, but any kind of a squat, really, to be honest with you, even a goblet, I'll feel it a little more on my knees. I never feel it on a deadlift. So that's another kind of advantage for me.
Yeah. And also you think there's significantly less knee flexion. It's much more of a hip extension exercise than a knee extension exercise, because generally speaking, you're not sitting in to as low a position as you would in squatting. So as I said, I just think that the orthopedic cost is really reduced. And so we would stay with that as a bilateral exercise for longer in our athletic population.
Yeah, good stuff. Coach, you wrote an article, Why We Moved Away from Bars. I mean, it's pretty obvious for anybody that's been following you for a while, of course. We knew that already. But there was also a thread, treadmills and other assaults on the training space. And I know you answered about what he had asked about with, the cardio equipment. But I wrote that I felt like squat racks are really the assault on a lot of training spaces for people that don't do squatting. Like it just seems to be and you even said our squat, and you wrote, quote, the squat under quotes, have become bench press stations and pull-up bars, and we rarely see a bar in the rack at chest height. Do you feel like, I know there's been a lot of changes, and we actually have a special episode coming up next time on all different gyms talking about what changes they have made from COVID that have been positive and they're going to keep. And we talked about lately, last couple episodes with you, is some of this pod idea and the way you've done things, and you're not going back. So talk to me about the squat rack, because again, your squat racks have become bench. Do you really need all these squat racks in your gym?
I know the short answer, I don't really think so. I think, again, if someone said to me, okay, you're going to redesign your business and you're going to have a reduced budget, that's something that probably would get done away with. But as I said, we need it, for us, because of our youth market. We need to be able to bench press, and I don't see myself buying standard sort of bench press setups and putting those in a gym.
Yeah.
So, chin up bars. So I think this is where like the half rack really kind of comes in handy, because you don't end up with these, the big cages that are really just made for heavy squatting. I mean, that's the only reason you need that big, massive cage type setup. So to me, they're definitely not, like if someone said, I don't deal with American football and I want to set up a weight room, I would probably be like, yeah, don't even bother with racks. Maybe just go wall mounted chin up bars or something along that line, because that's the only thing that you really need. The two things that we need it for are to bench press and to do chin ups. We don't need them. And interestingly, with both of those, neither one of those things are what you would normally associate with why I bought my power rack. But I think it does make it sort of part of the standard.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Coach, we're going to let you go. So thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you next time.
And thank you very much. I appreciate it as always.
All right, guys, another reminder that the wait is finally over. The Perform Better app is live. It features amazing presentations from this year's virtual summer seminar series, which I was part of. It also has top presentations from earlier functional training summits. So make sure you check it out. It's free. It's an app. You know where to get it in the App Store or at Google Play. Also, what they're doing now, they're starting free weekly webinar series, and they're starting on February 2nd. Carlos Santana will be doing Train Like a Fighter Without Getting Hit. Also, Matthew Ibrahim, who was recently on the podcast, he's going to be doing his deceleration and landing mechanics presentation. Lee Taft is coming up. Lee Burton is coming up. So lots of good stuff. Check out the weekly webinar series at performbetter.com.
Welcome to the Certified Functional Strength Coach segment. My name is Kevin Carr, and today we're on part 6 of our 7-part series titled Movement is Medicine, where we discuss the wide array of benefits that exercise has on physical, emotional, and psychological health. Last episode, we discussed the impact that exercise can have in managing depression symptoms. And for this episode, we're going to continue to discuss exercise in the brain and talk about how exercise can help you maintain your cognitive health as you age. Similarly to how exercise can help reduce symptoms of depression, research is showing how exercise can improve the function of our brain with aging and reduce the likeliness of cognitive decline from diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. A hallmark of age-related cognitive impairment is the shrinking of brain mass as we age. Beginning in the 3rd decade of life, the human brain can begin to show structural decline, which is disproportionately large in the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes of the brain. This decline is contemporaneously associated with the deterioration of a broad array of cognitive processes. Luckily, research is beginning to come out to show how exercise can not only slow down structural decline, but actually help reverse it even in the later stages of life. A study examining the effect of aerobic exercise on the brain volume of 60 to 79-year-old adults found that aerobic exercise done for 1 hour, 3 times per week at 50 to 70% of heart rate reserve actually increased brain volume in the temporal and prefrontal cortex, the 2 areas that are often reported to show substantial age-related deterioration. That's amazing. It actually made the brains of 60 to 79-year-old adults bigger. Additionally, research is also beginning to demonstrate that strength training can also help us build up our brains. A randomized control study of 155 women ages 65 to 75 found that strength training 1 to 2 times per week significantly improved executive functioning, as well as reduced brain loss, helping to maintain their neurological structure and function in the subjects as they aged. A major takeaway here is that exercising does more than just building our muscles. It also helps us build up and maintain our brains. And while some people might not be inspired to exercise by the way it impacts our physical appearance or performance, we should all be motivated to maintain the functionality of our brains as we head into our later years of life. For more information on how exercise can help save our brains as we get older, head on over to our blog at certifiedfst.com.
Hey, this is Adam.
And this is Tim.
Welcome back to the TrainHeroic Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Oh, yeah.
So in this, the internet age and COVID, there's definitely been a surge in remote or online training services.
Yeah.
And with that come questions on how to reach a bigger audience and how to get more customers.
Sure.
So one thing that happens a lot, when people get excited to do this is, they start majoring in minors. They start focusing on all the small stuff before they've got their foundations under them. So Tim, what have you seen with that?
Yeah. So I think there's some buzzwords in online marketing right now. One of the big ones is conversion, right? Everyone's focusing on how do I convert my people into sales? Another one is paid advertisement opposed to organic search or something like that. Those are 2 pretty hot topics right now, but I think of those kind of as supplements, right? They're protein shakes. And before you can supplement your diet with a protein shake, You need the meat and potatoes. You need the eggs. You need the high quality protein, things of that nature. So what is that stuff, Adam, is really the question. Once I tell folks that, well, let's not worry so much about conversion right now. Let's focus on the foundation.
So yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying, Tim, is like, of course we want people to convert to customers, but you're focusing on this outcome, right? And you have to do the stuff to get there, to set the stage for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So conversion is important, but without the underlying foundation, it really doesn't matter. So what is that foundation? Well, it's pretty simple. To keep things simple today, traffic is what we're talking about. And traffic is how many people are traveling to your offering or seeing your sales page, have the opportunity to purchase. The more of those people you drive, the better chance you have at converting at a higher percentage. That's the foundation. If you're not driving the right amount of people, your conversion rate won't matter. Therefore, investing in something like paid ads won't matter either. You have to attack that foundation. So it comes down to, how do I attract people to my offering, or how do I help them find me, is really the question we want to help coaches answer.
Paid ads are going to be a lot different, bringing a different audience than your kind of like organic reach,
Yeah.
And the idea is that that organic reach, the people who actually know you, followed you, is that over time you've given them these nuggets of value, and they trust you, and they buy into you and all that. And so you've done all this work to nurture them along the way. Yep. Whereas like running a paid ad is a lot more like a cold call. It's a lot more like, I better wow you up front. Like, you better really need this thing right now. I got to get lucky that I get on the right eyeballs.
Dude, that's a great metaphor. And you said something interesting there. You said providing folks value. And that's what this is all about. It's about two things. It's about consistently posting through your best channels. 95% of you folks out there, it's going to be Instagram. So we'll use that as an example. You have to post consistently. Remember, if you put a story out there, only 4% of your followers will see any one given story. Okay, a few more percent, a larger amount of people will see like a standard grid post. But the key is to provide value. And Instagram has changed the way they look at value. They want people to share content, and they want people to save content. So if you're putting out a piece of content, you should say, man, this should be so valuable, someone needs to save it. Or someone should be thinking, man, little Jimmy or little Susie could really use this tidbit, so they're going to share it with them. That's huge. And now your post becomes prioritized over others that aren't as engaging. That's how more people see your stuff. But you have to do it consistently. Remember, only a small group of your people will ever see one post. So
how often is that, Tim? What do you mean by consistent?
At least once a day. It's got to be at least, what I'd call a grid post, kind of a standard Instagram post, or a story, probably more stories, around 3 stories a day. But you don't have to be a walking billboard for your offering. And I think that's the point. And what scares a lot of coaches is like, man, I'm not just going to keep putting ad up on Instagram because people are going to get sick of it. Well, first of all, not that many people are going to see it, so they won't. And if you're providing value, you can use your description of one little line to kind of use that as a call to action to get people to sign up. But just provide value, nutritional tips, exercise tips, rest day, recovery tips, sleep tips, whatever it might be. I use tips a lot there, but I think you get the point. Things people want to save and share. The more you do that, the more people are going to see it.
Yeah, that's an interesting tidbit about Instagram. They've started prioritizing saves even over other forms of engagement.
Absolutely.
So who are some good examples, people that we know who do this really well, Tim?
Yeah, there's a couple. Catalyst Athletics, that's Coach Greg Everett, does a phenomenal job. Max Schmarzo, a lot of you probably know that guy. He's a young up-and-comer. Always an athlete is his team, and Strong by Science are his accounts. Those are phenomenal. And if you want to read up on this and get a good idea of how you can leverage tools you already have, Adam, like Google Analytics, something everyone has to check their online products. Our director of marketing, DJ, just put out an awesome article on the blog. It's called I'm Marketing My Remote Training Services. How do I know it's working? It is the best breakdown of Google Analytics on the internet.
Yep. I think that really demystify things for folks and, keep them focused on the right things.
100%.
Cool. That's going to do it for us today. Go to TrainHeroic.com, check out that blog post. And while you're there, you might start a free 14-day trial. We got pricing in there starting as low as $9.99 to suit any kind of coach.
Welcome to the Fit to Speak segment. My name is Jenny Rearick, and today I'm going to talk about message organization, which is a critically important step in the communication process. We are on the third segment of my series on communication as a system. The system of communication is made up of 4 overarching elements. Those include, in order, number 1, a communication assessment, 2, message organization, 3, message translation, and 4, delivery. Today, we're going to focus on the second skill or element, which is message organization. I'm going to tell you why it's important and then give you one example framework you can use starting today. How you organize what you're going to say or write is important because it's ultimately what determines whether or not your listener or reader will be able to follow along and understand what your message is. If your message is messy and disjointed, you ramble either in your speaking or in your writing, you'll lose your audience's attention because you're asking them to do too much work. They shouldn't have to figure out what's important to remember and what's not. They should easily be able to identify what you're talking about, what point you're trying to make, why you're making that point, and then know what to do with the information you've given them. If you think of your information as a puzzle, it's your job to put the puzzle together before your audience or reader shows up. I'm going to talk you through one framework I love to use, and it's called PREP. P-R-E-P. The reason why I love it, or reasons, is because it's easy to remember. It can be used on the fly in impromptu moments, and it works. So here it is, PREP. The first P stands for point. You're going to either say or write the point you want to make. This should be a clear, simple statement. Next is R, which stands for reason or reasons. You're going to list usually between 1 and 3 reasons explaining your point. Next is E, which stands for evidence. You're going to give evidence to support the reason or reasons you just gave. The evidence can come in the form of data, an example, an analogy, a quote, or a demonstration. And finally is the second P, which stands for point. Again, you're going to close the loop of your message by restating your main point. We know that people remember most what they hear last. So this is your opportunity to reiterate your point to make it clear. In order to understand this better, I want to give you an example of how it sounds in action. Let's say I am a trainer and I'm trying to convince my gym owner to start charging for our initial consultations, which we currently offer for free. And my gym owner's name is Rachel. Hey, Rachel, can we talk about charging our customers for the initial consultation? There's the first P in PREP, my point. I think that adding a fee will reduce the last minute cancellations that we're seeing and will convert more clients because we're going to be then attracting the clients that can actually afford our training fees. So now I've just listed 2 reasons, which is the R. Just last week, we had 3 people cancel their initial consultation within 3 hours of the scheduled time without any penalty. And because it was so late, we couldn't even fill that spot with a paying client. Also, we've only been able to convert 50% or so of our initial consultations into paying clients. And many of those people have told us it's because they can't afford our training prices. So now I've just given one piece of evidence for each of the 2 reasons that I listed. So I think it will save us money and improve our conversion rate if we charge $25 for our initial consultations. Are you on board with doing this? And that's my second point to wrap it all up. So there it is in action: PREP, point, reason, evidence, point. That's what I have for you today. If you liked what you heard and you want access to a PDF that details what you just listened to, along with bonus message organization templates for this specific segment, visit the Fit to Speak website, www.fit-to-speak.com. On the website, you can also get more information about one-on-one coaching and upcoming online courses and one-day live events.
All right, now it's time for the Naamly Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by Naamly, the ultimate retention tool designed specifically for fitness coaches and gyms to help your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly, that's NAAMLY.com. You can schedule a demo. It's what I did. You'll get a feel for what you can do with this incredible tool. Use the referral code Strength Coach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Got to try this out, guys. All right, today I have on Tim Caron. Tim's been on the podcast before. He's a huge member at StrengthCoach.com, contributes a lot over a long time now. And I had him on, I think, when he was the head strength and conditioning coach at Army. And he's gone on to open his own place a bunch of years back called Allegiate Gym in Redondo Beach. He has his own podcast now called the PH Podcast. Also worked at USC and Georgia Tech, and we wanted to get on the phone to talk about some stuff that's going on right now. So, Tim, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I love being on this. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the show, and I really am excited to kind of talk about what we're about to get into. And thank you for having me again.
All right, cool. Well, Tim, I wanted to take a step back and kind of go back to your West Point days, because I loved your quality control case study article that you did, and I think there was some really good lessons in there. And I think one of the lines you says, what you could probably imagine was a group of guys willing to run through a brick wall for a shared goal. What they did not have was a clear understanding of what brick wall to run through. I absolutely love that. So I want you to talk about the advice you would give, because we got a lot of strength coaches out there, like collegiate strength coaches and guys and ladies looking for a job, and what your advice is in this article when they're taking over a new job. Also, I want you to touch on later how range of motion can help with discipline and toughness. So talk to us about this article.
As you were describing that, and I immediately thought to the post that you guys had on strengthcoach.com and the forums about the transition of title to performance coach / strength conditioning coach, and what the symbolism of that is. And, I feel like I'm in this middle ground of a pretty good understanding of science. And I like to geek out. I can get into it. And then I still have a great passion just for coaching and lifting, where honestly, I've had so many incredible conversations with old strength coaches, even my functional medicine doctor, Dr. James Laval, work with him and go back to oh man, he finds out he's a big fan of Kim Wood and Arthur Jones. And I've read everything. I've gone through HIIT workouts. So I feel like I have this interesting middle of the road. I can mix it up with the bodybuilders and the powerlifters and the weightlifters, but I can also get down there with my lab coat and my Bunsen burner and talk with the scientists a little bit. And I think about that when young coaches ask me, because I can find their reservation of I feel this compelling nature to go towards the science. And it's a little bit more for their demographic of tangible. I can read a book, I can go on a blog, I can listen to a podcast at any time I want. And I don't meet this brick wall of, you need experience. And on the other level, I can have compassion and empathy because I've gone through the situation with coaches who have a lot of understanding and deep breadth of knowledge of what they're doing, just not really knowing how to apply it. And I think when I'm looking at now, working with young coaches, and this, dichotomy is created, so to speak, where you can go, all right, well, it's important that you have a great understanding of what you're doing, but man, you got to be able to apply it, and you got to be able to understand people and the softer science or the harder science, whatever you want to go into. That's your passion, but at the end of the day, man, you got to be able to do both, and you got to be able to do it both really well for you to excel and exceed in this expectations in this industry. And when I wrote that quality control, I think one of the big things that I think will help some of these young coaches is the ability to debrief and reflect and look back on some experiences. And one of the things I actually did with that is I tied it into calling one of my former athletes who was there that first year. And it was an interesting thought because, one of the ones I really try to challenge myself in is not just create my own echo chamber of, I was great. We obviously had success. We, ended a 15-year losing streak in Navy, and we can go about our business from there and justify our existence by that success, but was that the full perception? Was that someone's the consensus of what everyone thought? And I had a lot of athletes like reach out, like, man, that was really special. It was a really great time. I really appreciate you doing what you did. But there's other athletes out there that probably don't have that same sentiment and don't feel as strongly as amazing as I thought it was. So I wanted to balance out my reflection and my debrief with literally just an interview with a former athlete. And I tried to ask him some leading questions of like, did you really feel that way? Did you really think it was as special as I thought it was? And there were some moments that I think were cathartic and a little bit healing for both of us. So I had this mission of 4 years of making us more physical, tougher, more disciplined. And one of the bigger things that we talked about on that was going through a range of motion, and that we thought was representative of injury prevention and control and discipline. It's a little bit more grittier if we're going to get a little Andrew Ducksworth on that. When we got to the end of that, a lot of our athletes had to sacrifice a lot of the load on the bar, and they had to, check their ego at the door, and they had to demonstrate a lot of humility. And with that being said, it might actually led to a performance decrement for some of our older players. And to that point, it led to other characteristics that we thought embodied what we wanted to become. And when we got there, and just like I was at Springfield College, where you get a bunch of really strong kids just missing something, right? They're unable to get in certain positions. They don't change direction well. They don't have adequate speed. They don't have a high football acumen. They don't have whatever, right? And, to that point, it was just literally zeroing in on what do we thought the biggest limiting factor was and fixing that at the sake of everything else. And we were small, and we were really struggled to get full range of motion. So that thought process of let's just Occam's razor this and just look at the simplest, most easily, most tangible understanding of how can we fix a really complex problem and fix it. And as we started to unfold that, and talking back to some of those athletes that went through that, there's two perceptions: the ones that had the incredible success and like, it's exactly what I need when I needed it. And then there's the other. It's like, I really had to swallow a lot of my pride, had to swallow a lot of my personal sense of confidence, because I was the one who could squat 550 pounds. I'm the one who can clean 350. I'm the one who can bench 400. And you're telling me, take the weight off the bar and do this correctly, or do this through this range of motion, or do this with this position, with this tempo, for this set rep scheme. That was really hard for me, because I identified me as a leader or as the top guy in this team by what I could do in the weight room. And, I think as we reflect and we look back, it's really easy to go, all right, we were successful. We did a really good job. I had, of that staff, pretty much all those guys going on really prominent positions. So pretty much every one of those guys going on a head strength coach position from there. And our athletes, we led to having a really successful team. And I'm not going to sit there and say that 7 years later that it was or 6 years later, it was the catalyst for Army being what it is now. But I think it was the first step in having a reflection off of what we wanted to be and be able to build that foundation. It just maybe came at the expense of someone's direct experience or direct performance. And I just needed to have that closure or that ability to have that conversation with that, specifically that athlete, of how did you feel about that? I basically told you point blank, we're going to do this at the expense of this. And that might not have resonated the same way I thought it would. So having that, almost like cathartic release and go into that aspect. But going back to the original point of what is my job, and I think myself as a performance coach, obviously I want to improve performance, but what really made that happen is logistics and holding people accountable and zeroing in on what exactly needs to be done. Because it's one thing to say, get range of motion. It's a whole other thing to actually implement that and go through that. And when bullets are flying and you start getting momentum as a staff and kids start getting confidence and start loving the program, the weight's going to go up on the bar. Do you have the assertiveness, the confidence, and the vision to go, that's not looking the way I want it to go. It's not where I want it to be. Stop, do it right, or do it over. And we're going to do this continuously till we get to the point. Because as we start to evolve as a profession, as we start to look at what our purpose is, I think we need to have a clear vision on where we could bring value to each and every single team or athlete or client that we have. And a lot part of that is sticking to the plan and knowing what your true purpose is. If someone tells me they want to lose weight, that's what we're doing. I'm not going to get myopically focused on, I had some guy clean 350 pounds at Army. So that's for this client that's 40 years old and wants to lose a couple pounds because they want to look better, has to clean 350 pounds, And I think that quality of looking back and saying, that was successful there because of this. Now this will be successful here because of this, and having the ability to reflect and go back and understand that. And so I get the concept of performance coach versus strength conditioning coach. I just think performance coach is the one that's, talking about the theory and talking about the tactics. And I still feel like there's an element of strength conditioning coaches are the logistics guys and the ones that go out there and implement the plan. And, I always talk to, strength conditioning coaches about, you can bring value. You don't need to understand complex statistics and analytics to be proficient at this. What you need to do is be able to show that you can bring value by implementing it and getting the guys to fill out their questionnaires, getting the guys to fill out their RPE, getting the guys to wear their monitors, wear their GPS is, wear these things. Because you get a guy out there who's really good at breaking down stats. It is painful to watch them interact with 20-year-old kids who don't understand the purpose of this and try to get them to wear this stuff or do this stuff or execute this stuff. It's not saying you got to be punishing. It's not saying that you got to be aggressive disciplinarian. It's just saying that you need to have a little bit more ability to communicate and coordinate things on a day-to-day. And I think there's an element of both. So like when I think strength coach, I think logistics. And when I think performance coach, I think tactics. And I think as we start to blend the both, like it's okay to silo yourself off in one area. It's okay to have a skill between the two. It's also okay to be really, really focused on one thing that you think is going to be the most important aspect. Where it comes to problem is you start overly categorizing that as like the means of success without any better like reflection and debriefing. And that to me as I start to reflect and look back at quality control or quality assurance or listening to like some of the stuff that you guys do with Coach Boyle and having that perspective to get on the forums. It's such an important process to go, okay, am I doing this? Can I ask someone else, do they agree with that? And just the reflection and debriefing part, it's hard. It's difficult. Sometimes it's painful. You're sitting there getting a burning sensation in your stomach of like, man, like this guy does not feel the same way that I do. Like I'm going to get a guy on there that I did a mobility plan here next month. And first game, man, NFL season, starting right tackle. We reached our goal. Like we had a goal of him playing in the NFL and starting, and first game towards ACL. And I'm scared absolutely to death about having that conversation. And I know it needs to be done because if I don't, one, for him, he's not going to have that perspective of the rationale of why we did what we did. But the other aspect is, how am I going to get better? How am I not going to make the same mistake twice? How am I going to look back and go, okay, was that my fault or was it? And he might be like, that was a whole multivariate thing, got hit, whatever. But I need that cathartic release. I need to have that ability to go back and say, where was I at fault or what did I do well? And what can I learn from that? And, the reflection piece, of all things, when we look back at like quality control, you don't know. You absolutely have no idea if it was a well-implemented plan or for good intervention until you can effectively break that down and say, we missed the mark here. And how do I determine that? And I think that's where we go from, man. That's what my hope is.
What, though, look, the bottom line is you had this interview on a Thursday, got hired on a Friday, started on a Monday. You didn't have a huge needs analysis or any real huge time to say, this is what we, like when you were talking about in the article is, what's the big hole? And let's go aggressively fix it, right? But you didn't really have that time. So you were kind of told, like in the interview, they asked you what you would do on day one of training. And then you said, well, what do you want them to look like preseason in our fourth year? And they said, I want a tough, physical, disciplined football team. So you implement what you had to do, but how did you get buy-in? Because it sounds like, obviously you must have had some buy-in, but here you are doing what you're doing. And then, a couple of years later, you're talking to this guy who says, well, I was lifting X amount and I wasn't that happy about it, but obviously he did it. And I would think a lot of times when we do that, when we kind of see the light, we go back and say, damn, Tim was right. And I felt good that year. I had a good year. Whatever. Tim was right. But how do you justify all of that? And in that piece, how did you get the buy-in?
So right before that, and I didn't go through this in the blog post, but we just got fired at USC. And, for context, we were ranked preseason number 1 in 2012. We had a first-round draft pick, NFL quarterback coming back. We had a really loaded team. We ended up going 7-6, and ironically ended up losing to Georgia Tech, the team I was working with before, in a bowl game at the Sun Bowl. And then next year, our head coach gets fired, and then at the end of that year, our whole staff gets fired. And so at that point, you got a really big evaluation of what potentially like you're not doing correctly, or, you know, honestly, just a whole lot of humility, right? Like this whole 2-year span of really missing the mark and not really evaluating what you need to do. And I think at that point, you can sit there and blame, or you can sit there and cast judgment of like, wow, that was not my fault. I'm just a strength coach. And, you know, I think there's an element of like, probably shouldn't take too much credit for having, looking back at SC and what we had in 2011 of how many first-round NFL draft picks and how many guys still playing in the NFL. Comparatively speaking to of like going 7-6 the next year, you know, there's not too much blame or too much credit to give on either end, but you do have some ability to come back and say, what could I have done differently? And for that place, and we had almost like a really cool case study our last year there. The one difference we made coming off of 2012 going on 2013 was just being more positive and make it a more enjoyable work experience, where honestly these kids were just, that's what they wanted, you know, and they played better. And, you know, our head coach at the time took over an interim basis, like, just make it fun. Let's just do a good job in that regard. You know, and one part was like, we're trying to sell them or convince them that we want to be here, we want to work with you guys, and we want to be here for the future. But the other part is that was the one limiting factor. So if I got anything out of that experience was have a really good ability to look at what are you not doing, and if that's a limiting factor. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really just you got to keep plowing through and just, all right, man, accountability, discipline. That's what we're doing here. But then when I got to Army, I did have a 3-day span there where I can communicate to some of the athletes, communicate to some of the coaches. I mean, I'm talking the equipment manager. I'm trying to grab as many people as possible. Like, where do you think we're not doing a good job is? And you know, just trying to get some sort of a semblance of what the people think is the limiting factor. And there was some stuff, and I think, you know, our head coach, Coach Munkin, really saw this immediately by the way they played the year before and just the way they held themselves. There's this idea that when you get up, quote unquote, the hill at Army, which if you've ever been to Army West Point, their barracks are pretty much at the bottom of the hill or bottom of the mountain, right by a river, the Hudson. And then as you go up the mountain, you go pretty much to Mikey Stadium where the weight room is. And as you come up the hill, that was their safe haven, their place where they can kind of let their hair down metaphorically. And you go through that and you're like, okay, like, I get it. You guys have a really hard day. You have a really hard experience here where you're constantly getting berated by what you're wearing, how you're doing it. You're never going to be good enough. So when you come up here, this should be a relief. So ironically, I'm leaving USC where the one thing that we could have done better over the course of 4 years is making it more enjoyable and funner. And I'm sitting there saying that, like, hearing from everyone that this place needs to get tighter and more structured up here. They need to have more consistency and continuity from what they're doing down at the bottom of the hill and up here, because they don't respect this up here. They don't value this as much because they're not held to the same standard. So I'm imagining right now, like, the one area I can do as I'm driving across country from USC to Army to go, all right, like, what could I do better? I'm going to be more positive. I'm going to be more inviting. I'm going to be just more supportive to everyone telling me, like, there's a very loose structure up here, and these kids just need that discipline up here because they don't respect it. They don't value it. They don't look at it the same way they look at the military stuff. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to throw that whole idea of being more supportive out the window and see how it goes. And, you know, one of the things that we got into in the interview was first meeting, Coach Munkin was just pissed. I mean, he's always mad in general, but he saw a bunch of the guys left their cleats in the middle of the hallway. So the mode of operation was just convenience-wise. We have a big meeting room. The guys would leave their cleats in the hallway and then run over to the indoor practice facility and then go through some stuff. So they grab the cleats and go from the meeting room. But it looks bad, you know. So if a recruit comes in or the admin comes in, you see 200 pairs of cleats sitting on the ground. You know, it just doesn't look very elite. And to Coach Munkin's point, it was like, you guys need to understand the perception you guys give when you have this new structure here. And it looks bad on me, it looks bad on our coaching staff. But he's like, you got 3 minutes to get over to our indoor, which probably takes 5 minutes in general to get over to, with getting all your stuff. And with that being said, the guys were just really like, this is impossible. Like, they were just complaining and moaning about it. So we get over there, and no one made that timeline. So I'm like, all right, well, I have a decision to make here. Do I just sit there and let it slide, or do I make an immediate and abrupt impact? I mean, this is literally the first thing I'm doing with the guys as a team. So I said, all right, screw it, I'm just going to up down here. We did 50 up downs, which if you've ever done 5 up downs, 50 is a lot. It took us probably 15 minutes, and then we lined them up, and then we did probably the longest dynamic warm-up you can ever imagine. Guys were just not doing it well. Either they didn't care, or they didn't understand, or they didn't really want to appreciate the value of when we say 10 yards, we mean 10 yards. So we literally spent the first session doing just up downs and a really long, repeated dynamic warm-up. And then we called it. It was an hour, and like, all right, like, we can't go into the weight room until we can understand the importance of being on time, being prepared, and executing on the tasks that we get to do. And I can imagine now, as I'm going home that night and I'm reflectively thinking about it, like, I completely just threw out the window the whole positive thing. I defaulted to what I know or what I inherently am better at. I'm not saying that was a natural, organic thing. I've never really became like this hardcore disciplinarian. I just knew it needed to be done at a certain point. But at Army, that was probably the best thing we could have done, because as we start to build this precedent and as we start to build this standard, the guys appreciated holding each other accountable. And where I think it really manifested is the consistency from year to year. And I think as I look back now at USC and Army, we probably weren't as consistent as we should be. And we're probably a little bit less, because it's okay to be structured and disciplined. It's so bad when you're structured and disciplined, just and inconsistent about it. And to that point in Army, I evaluated, like, okay, it wasn't a matter if I wasn't positive enough. It was a matter if I just wasn't consistent enough. And knowing when to time the guys are doing a good job, tell them that. And as we started to transcend the entire year, that aspect of, hey, I'm going to be consistent with the structure and discipline here, and I'm going to be consistent with holding you to a high standard. And when you do a good job, I'm going to tell you you're doing a good job. And when you can do better, I'm going to tell you can do better. But as a whole, I'm not here for any other purpose to help you reach your goals. And looking back over what all the experiences were, I think that was probably the best thing, man. And, to the point of, like, looking at, where we're going to go in the future, like, that's your job, is to have that vision of what is it going to look like 3-4 years down the road from the things that you're doing. What's a concentric circle off of up-downing someone 50 times and then making them do 20 lateral shuffles over and over because they're not touching the line? And to that point of, like, we need to establish this now. We don't have a second shot at this, but man, I got to come back tomorrow and be as equally committed to reaching these standards. I got to come back the next day. And when they do a good job, support them, tell them they're doing a great job. And I think as we start to look back, I think that's why we had such a great rapport with the guys in Army, is because of that simple thought of what our purpose was and understanding what our real role was, and consistency, support, and being just the missing link that they don't have, whether it's from football or from genetics or whatever other aspect, trying to help them in whatever area that's deficient.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think, I've been listening to a lot of different military books, SEALs, et cetera, and no one's ever telling them they're doing a good job. So it must feel nice when, at least when you're doing something in the gym that, cool, or at least we go there and we, when I do it right, I do get a little bit of praise. So that's got to feel good. Yeah. Well, let's talk about, you were there, and here you are at, Georgia Tech, USC, West Point. A lot of guys listening, a lot of ladies listening are like, I want to do that. What's wrong with this guy? Why didn't he stay in school? But, look, we all have different goals and dreams and vision. And so you ended up leaving and opening your own place in Redondo Beach, Allegiate Gym. And I know you and I were talking the other day about, it's such a crazy time right now. There's so much uncertainty. There really is. And the funny thing is they can listen to what you're doing right now in terms of, you're in California. technically you're not even really supposed to be open in indoors. I talked to Alan Cosgrove yesterday. They're still not open. We're going on a year here. Every state is so different. People just don't know. There's a lot of gyms. A huge gym in Massachusetts, Chief Fitness. Lauren and Jason Pack just decided to close the doors because the town they live in has been pretty tough on them as well as the state has been. So again, every state is different rules, different things. And a lot of guys, I was kind of shocked when you were saying, and I'm still getting a lot of guys want to leave, what I would think is a relatively safe position in college, unless you're with the football team, and you're, to go open your own place. So talk to us about just your transition and what that was like, and then what you're talking to when coaches are calling you and they're asking you about doing that.
So my thought of leaving at Army, there's a lot of variables, and as I look back retroactively, I think I really wanted that control and autonomy. But at the time, and I'll go into what I mean by that here in a second, but at the time, it was I wanted to do an inventory of what my future looked like. At the point I was 35, I was engaged, but it was early, right? So I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids at that point. So it wasn't like I was locked in. And this feeling of, all right, there's no anchor here. I don't need to have that consistency and that stability. And I wanted to potentially pursue the idea of something where I could have a little bit more of my own spin on, or my own outlet that I was guarded or kind of manipulated by other factors like coaches and administrators. So that process, but then I was looking forward, man. I was I'm looking around the room, and I was if we're not successful here, what does my future look like? I'm going to probably take about at least a 50% pay cut, become the assistant again, or if I'm lucky enough to get that position, or on the other end, I'm going to work for a guy, to be frank, I don't really agree with, or I don't really respect all that much, and I don't want that. And I'm not saying that all football coaches are bad. You just look at the hiring practices of why people come, and you get the interview questions that you may get. And it's not 100% across the board, but some of the stuff you are just scratching the surface of what I can bring to your athletic department from potential wise. And that's not their fault. That's mine, right? That's our profession's fault. We have a very poor understanding of how to brand ourselves and sell ourselves. So I knew I wasn't good at that. And I knew whatever predicament I was in was my own fault, and taking ownership of that. If I'm going to be an elitist walking around the room, I'm the smartest guy here right now, and I'm going to act like I'm superior to everyone, I can't get upset when a coach goes, I can't connect with him. I don't think he's going to bring the values that I want as a head strength conditioning coach. So I had to evaluate the corner that I put myself in, of thinking that I'm the smartest guy of all time and acting like it too, which as a 5'8" white guy walking around athletic departments, you need to stick out a little bit. And I felt like being the smartest guy in the room was going to be the one area I could control, and being consistent with that and staying ahead of the curve. But on the other end comes with a little bit of distance that you create between you and some of the assistants. And I had a really good relationship with our head coach, and I had a really good relationship with a lot of the coaches. I just knew that at a certain point, when it reached this pinnacle of whether we get fired or someone leaves or some circumstantial thing where I can't work at Army anymore, that my outlook looked bleak. And I didn't love that uncertainty. I didn't love that lack of control. I didn't love the evaluation off of, in retrospect, my interview with the coach at Army was, all right, man, 3 questions. Are you going to bring the juice? What are you going to do day one? And then some other really unnecessary question, but to him that's important. And I was like, man, you don't really notice how many certifications I got, or how much education I got. We worked together at Georgia Tech, but my progression from Georgia Tech to USC, from USC, is profound, man. I know so much more. I'm so much more skilled. Never cared, never mattered. And I'm like, oh, what's the point of getting all this education just for the sake of doing it? All I got to do is be just energetic and loud. And I'm not sitting saying don't do that as a strength coach. I think you need to bring passion and energy, but I didn't want that future of 10 years from now trying to just fake it or be this thing that I don't want to be, or be this thing that I knew I couldn't be. And I started looking at my options, and the opportunity presented itself. And one thing I would say to coaches as they start to thinking about leaving is, you know, like, evaluate what the better long-term, not only financial outcome's going to be, but also to personal outcome. Like, do you have more autonomy with your schedule? Do you have more autonomy in your life? Do you have more control of what you do, when you do it, how you do it? And is that a value to you? And, you know, one of the things I started to look at is, all right, I'm working for a coach. I have no control of my schedule. I haven't had a vacation in years. I haven't been able to do things or go to things or like be with friends and family at times that they may have needed me. I looked at the long-term financial outcome. I'm like, all right, well, if we do this right, in theory, I should be able to make more over the time. And this is making a six-figure salary. And I'm not sitting there saying that you're going to be rich working in private. Like, it's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of lost revenue in order to get to that outcome that you want. But man, it's betting on yourself. It's looking at yourself as the safer bet. I believed in myself, and I look at the long-term trajectory of like, man, if I'm that good, if I think I'm that good, it's time to put my money where my mouth is, literally, and go out there and do it and see if I can earn this myself and see if I can go out there and be a provider for my family as well as, you know, people that work under me, and, you know, bring that element to that and having that skin in the game to be able to do that. And now, retroactively, I look back, I didn't like being told I couldn't do something when I wanted to do it. I didn't love that. And I don't like being restricted. I don't like being limited by the folks around me because of lack of foresight or lack of vision or lack of understanding. I want to push the threshold. And I know sometimes it can be hard on my staff here. And I'm like, we just implemented Bridge Gym where we got so many different analytics. We're doing such a complex program. And I just tell my staff all the time, like, you know, it's not my job to dumb this down or slow this down. It's your job to speed up and keep up because I'm moving and I want this thing to be the biggest, best thing in the world. And I didn't leave a really prominent position to be able to do that. You know, like, I need to have that outlet. I need to be able to push that threshold and reach higher boundaries. And I felt like there was a ceiling that was just weighing me down. I felt like there was elements that, like, I have to go through 17 different channels just to get one thing approved. I'm good with that. Like, I'm not saying I'm being like irrational or prudent or trying to rush through something. Like, I just wanted that ability to push the threshold of what we could do with human performance without restrictions or boundaries. And I'd gladly take a pay cut for a year or two, or honestly lose a lot of actually personal revenue in for that opportunity. And that in itself, like, you know, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I know I played the numbers and I have really good money people on my side. And, you know, I looked at it long-term wise, like, yeah, I'm convinced, man, I can make more money doing that. But now and retroactively, like, yeah, it's still important. I don't want to be a martyr. I'm not doing this for charity because I think I'm good and I should be compensated for that. But on the other end, it's like, I don't have anybody saying, oh man, I don't know, man, like that might not work with this team setting. Like, who are you to say that? Like, man, I've been doing this for over 15 years. I know exactly what's going to work and I know how to apply it. Like, let me run, you know, let me do this. And I had like just a captive audience, and from a nutrition standpoint, from a performance standpoint, like, I just struggle with those restrictions. Like, I had 30-minute sessions on Wednesday in season with our team because that's all I could get. And man, I still think it was a great session. But you talk about hustling through, like, and in a course of a season, you get, honestly, at best, 90 minutes with your guys a week to do stuff. And you're thinking, like, we're going to be responsible for the resiliency, for the performance. Like, you want us to be fast and tough going into our last game of the year. Like, and we got 90 minutes a week. Like, that's a tough thing to figure out, you know, and you piecemeal together and you started to look at what you can do. And he always asked me, my coach always asked me, do we need more time? Like, where? Who's going to suffer here? Like, I'm not telling you we're going to need more time when our kids are going to have to pay the price for that. Like, they're going to have to get up here early. They're going to have to sacrifice more of their time that they don't have. They're going to get just chewed out because they're not going to film and they're not doing extra work on the field, or they're not getting study hall. Like, I'm sorry, I love it, but the only ones who are going to suffer here are athletes, you know? And like, to that point, like, all this stuff, and then just looking around at inefficiencies, like, all right, man, like, I know we're squandering a lot of time here. I'm not squandering a single second on my end, you know, that element, and just being judged inappropriately. Like, we're really going to compare apples to apples here. Like, I really maximize what we do, and with our staff, with our athletes, with our time, with our resources. You know, I want to be encouraged. I don't want to be scolded or scoffed at, or like, or reprimanded because I'm too progressive or I'm too aggressive in one area. Like, and honestly, holding people to the fire. I'm like, man, we're going to push the threshold here. Like, your job to rise to the occasion, not necessarily make me slow down. And now I'm at this like outlet. I'm running. And sometimes it's like, oh man, that was a bad idea. Obviously, like, wow, that was too much too soon. And, to that element, I love that feeling of the ability to come back and say, like, all right, man, I made that mistake. I won't make it twice, and now I know better.
Yeah, I think also we've been talking a lot on this podcast over the last year or so about mission and knowing who you are too. And I think that's a big part. We've talked about in the past too, Coach Boyle and I, about motivation with employees and how it's not only financial. Like you were talking about, like you're not mentioning, you did mention financial, but at the same time, it's like, you're a guy who wants to be in control, number one, and you do want to do it your way. It's obvious from hearing you speak, and look, you want to be recognized, you want to be able to do. You have more to offer, and I think that's where a lot of people miss the boat is they don't understand what they themselves are about. They don't really truly understand what they want, and one way to do that is ask other people, which is all what you were talking about, calling those other athletes, seeing how you're doing. My friend just sent me a couple emails. She was doing some things on herself as well, and just asking like there's a couple of exercises that you do, and she asked, what are 3 words that come to mind when you think of me? And then there was like, how would you describe my work at whatever, right? Just so getting those outside opinions from people you trust to understand a little bit more about yourself. So what was the biggest challenge for you really going to Allegiate from West Point?
The open-endedness of it, the basically blank slate, where you walk into an athletic department and I've worked in probably now 7 different athletic departments in college strength conditioning. And I've started with new staff and I've started new positions. You have so many constraints. So you just kind of like figure out the boundaries and you go within those boundaries where you essentially take away all of the constraints. It's a blank slate. Like you decide pretty much what you want to do, when you want to do it, as you're doing it. And that's an adjustment, man. Like that's not the simplest thing to traverse. And there's a lot of questions you have no idea on, but depending on your mindset, right? If we're like a Carol Dweck type growth mindset, you look at every opportunity as a challenge and you can build off of that. Like, I think that's the area. And for me, like I knew I signed up for it and I think there's a lot of elements, and you hear a lot of coaches go off and, when they get fired, they call me and say, hey, I want to open up my own gym. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think you're emotionally ready for what you're about to undertake. Or the other level of like, I hate my job. I hate what I'm doing. Like, you need to read E-Myth because it's the classic mistake of small businesses. They hate where they're at, or they hate the people they're working with, and they always want to do it themselves. And they realize how much shortcomings they have in terms of the really big rocks or big elements of your business. It's not matter if you can do it well. Like, if you're a college strength conditioning coach or a team setting strength conditioning coach, you're probably better than 99% of the general population fitness industry. The question is, can you do it better than them from a marketing and a business standpoint? And I'm going to tell you probably can't, because you have no idea the amount of effort and time that puts into there. From a skill level, from a tactical level, like I take you guys all the time. But on the other level, it's like, do you have the foresight to go, I know nothing about developing a business. Like, and there's so many like nuances and things out there and elements that just like so open-ended, and you're just defining it as you go. And I find that when you're working in a very rigid and structured athletic department or team setting, where you just have essentially someone telling you the schedule, someone telling you the time you need to be there, someone telling you the things that you could do. Like, you inherit weight rooms, you inherit like staff, you inherit teams. Like, you play 12 games. There's so many boundaries. You don't realize when you go to a private setting that you have this complete blank slate. You pick a real estate like setting, and then it's completely filled with nothing. And then you say, well, I like this. And you don't really evaluate, man, like you're paying for that out of your pocket, right? So if I want a VersaClimber, which is a great tool, man, how much can I get return on investment off of that? there's one of those, I need 100 people going through here, and it's cost a lot to get one of those. How long can I actually return my investment from that process versus other stuff? And in this constant back and forth of, am I making a profit here? Am I doing this correctly from a logistics? Can we maximize our ability to make revenue off of this? As well as the whole other end of it is like, what does it look like to the person that doesn't care that you're a college transition coach? What does it look like to that person that has no definition of what value, like their definition of what I'm doing in terms of college transition coach, working with a Division I Power 5 school, is no different than the fitness trainer down the road, because they don't understand the level of education or experience you need to be able to be in that relative to that person down the road they just like, or they have a connection to, or some sort of, inbound lead to. Well, like, you're no different than them in that, in most of the customers' perspectives that you're going to deal with. So you're going to have to work really hard to convince them that you're good, or work really hard to convince them that you're better. And you need the right marketing side of it too. So that element of understanding the lack of boundaries, either like exciting or it's scary as hell. And I got to be honest, man, there was some fear of that, but I mean, you brought it up the other day, which I kind of like smiled. I'm like, that was probably the most helpful book of, I don't have any skill set in business or marketing. And when the people that wanted to align with me and, develop a product together, I knew that their skill set was more tied into that. I was like, man, this is like a match made in heaven. This is the dream. Like, I probably would not have taken that opportunity if I knew I didn't have those critical pieces to decide, and I just doing inventory of myself with lack of skill or knowledge in that area, that element there, and I'm obviously, like, so far, knock on wood, it was the right decision. But I know so many coaches that, like, yeah, I'm going to do it all myself to get 100% equity. Like, no, man, I'll take the equity hit and get some people in there that are more skilled and confident, because you're basically just lowering your potential for whatever you could be, because you know nothing about it, as opposed to, like, your knowledge on, strength conditioning and developing people is way above and beyond the expectations of general fitness. Just, you're not going to win because you don't know how to structure your business or your marketing aspect.
Yeah, it really is something where, you really need to focus on what you're good at. What are your strengths? Focus on those, and what your weaknesses are. That's where you need to, I think that's the hardest part. We were talking about E-Myth, you and I the other day as well, in terms of, like a lot of coaches right now, before we get into what you guys are doing over at Allegiate, but a lot of owners have had to go back to being the technician just because of the circumstances right now. Some people have had to go part-time with their staff, and they can't afford, because, there's the online thing, blah, blah, blah. So it is one thing where you had to be able to adjust, and you have to keep learning that piece of it. But if you don't know, you're playing with fire. But when these coaches are calling you, Tim, and I still have a hard time believing that this many people in this environment, especially with gyms, because we don't know, like, you guys are thriving there. You're outdoors, though. That's the one caveat. You at least have an outdoor space. I'm living in Indiana right now, and it's like 30 degrees every day, and a lot of people don't want to be outside to work out, and so what are you telling these coaches? What's that quick 2-minute phone call that you're I'm going to give you this advice before you leave your college setting?
So I think the reason why I get probably a lot of calls is the perception of success, and this idea that things are going great at all times, whatever it is I embody through social media. And to be honest, things are great. I'm a pretty optimistic person. Like, I'm a glass half full all day. Like, whenever someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm legitimately doing great. And very rarely am I, like, upset. I have this perspective of, like, I got a job to do and I'm moving forward. I'm pretty, like, myopic focus on progress. So that I think is at least, like, aspirational to, like, I can have that too. So I think I get a little bit of that element. And this like unwavering confidence, even if I'm not confident. Like, I think people have this, perspective with me of, oh, that guy figured it out. Like, no, I don't. I'm just like everyone else. I'm just struggling to make it through every single day. But at the prospect of a guy working in an athletic department, or a woman working in an athletic department, and, they get just chewed out by a coach, or they get their administration telling you got to take a furlough, or their administration telling you got to take a pay cut, or, I think the other element is a lot of people probably don't realize this is the level that I was working at a high level on strength conditioning, is we were running fat, man. Like we were inflated salaries, and I don't think it's inflated, but in the perspective of the admin, you know, you have meetings with people, and in my department alone, like I had myself making 6 figures and I had 2 assistants making close to 6 figures, you know, in a place like Army West Point, which is it's a lot, you know? So you look at that of like over 400K in actual money going to football strength conditioning, and it's expanded since then, you know, so admins having to make cutbacks all over the place, right? Like we have to maybe cut sports. We have to cut other things that we know are excessive or unnecessary. And you look at your ability to find what you do to an administrator. It's like, what value or how are you bringing return on investment over 400K in terms of revenue or in terms of expenses towards salaries for your staff? How do you explain that? How do you justify that? And I know I don't have that skill set or didn't. And I know strength conditioning coaches that communicate to don't. So they're coming back and saying, I'm going to have to take a pay cut or I'm going to get let go. You know, the trend is going, we got to cut, and we got to cut now because we don't have the money or the revenue coming in to make it through 2021. And the lowest hanging fruit to cut is things that we can't define. And that's strength conditioning. That's performance, which has really high inflated money coming in. And I don't know if they're worth that much, you know, like is a strength conditioning coach worth $1 million? I don't know. I mean, we compare it to athletic trainers who barely break 6 figures across the board, or ADs that are making 250K. Like when a strength coach is making more than the AD, it becomes a question of how long can that go for? So I think there's this like dynamic. And I think as you work in athletic departments and you've seen really good folks, like really good strength conditioning coaches get fired for honestly very poor explanations of like, we don't think it's good culture fit, or we don't think this is the right direction. It's a money decision. You make close to $500,000. So we don't want to pay that. And you're at the end of your contract. So we're going to go another direction. So those calls, I think, are more of a product of really looking at the landscape and having that decision to make. Like, man, I'm working 80 hours a week and I'm doing off this pretense of, man, one day potentially I can make 6 figures. And then all of a sudden that prospect starts to go away. And regardless of the consistency of a paycheck today, I think there's this element of fear and anxiety of that's not going to be like that forever. And to be honest, in my opinion, it shouldn't be that inflated because that's just a product of football coaches and agents getting you pulled up in that rank. And I think it's great if you're part of the 1% that's making that 250K plus a year. But the rest of us just scrapping for pieces, making 30, 40K, working 60, 80 hours weeks. And then all of a sudden that like looming prospect of they're starting to weed out some of these big names here. Man, this is hard. You know, you look at some of the guys who've left or got let go, like I can see the fear and anxiety. And I get that sentiment when I talk to these guys. Like, I think I was literally just a financial sacrifice because my administration did not really understand what we do and why we make as much as we do. And they're looking at, do we cut softball or do we start to cut salaries in some areas that we can't define? You know, and I think as I look at it like that, you start to get it. But where I get to the point of that like 1 minute conversation with folks, it's like, you got to understand, man, like this is a business. This is not something that if you have a true understanding of walking into. Like I spend most of my day working with my business partners on how to structure our business to optimize the experience for our members and our coaches. And I really try to work with our coaches to support them. And I coach 1-2 days a week now, and it's my outlet and I have a blast doing it. And I think it's just like, you know, keeping the carrot at the end of the stick for, you know, our coaches of like, I want you guys to bring that much energy and enthusiasm and that much passion to doing it correctly. But on the other end, you know, I know that if I do that to a degree so much so, like I'm going to neglect so many areas of my business and I'm going to neglect so many really crucial parts to making this thing work. And when you transition away from coaching, even as a head strength coach, like I coach more as a head strength coach than I do as a small business owner. And you got to evaluate that and you got to really understand that. I'm evolving as a leader and a person. And I still have this like ardent desire to learn more and grow more, but that's taken a huge hit. And that's taken a huge process or my process of I'm going to spend this amount of time reading or going through Con Ed. And, you know, and I think that evaluation of like, what are you going to do here? Are you going to be a coach that owns a business or are you going to be a business owner that coaches? And to that degree, I don't think many people really understand what that question means. And because they're in such a safeguarded place but that safeguarded place is becoming more and more vulnerable and susceptible to change. So it's like this, we're at a precipice, man. We're at this complete crossroads of people looking at that. And the fitness industry in a lot of ways is evolving and changing rapidly. We look at gyms in California have dropped by 40-50%. Some really high level profitable gyms have shut down. So you're leaving one area that's essentially evolving and dying or decaying into a degree that you don't like, into another area that's evolving, dying, and decaying. And it's going to more of an online presence, which is more marketing. And you're competing with Peloton and other entities online. And if you can look back at P90X, how many infomercials you can see for that, do you have the bandwidth, the creativity, the actual money to compete with that space? You have to work really hard to get one customer, relatively speaking, to all the options out there that they're bombarded with. And it's a different world. And I don't know if a lot of coaches, or at least I try to convey that, understand that they're leaving one area for a really difficult and complicated and exciting and rewarding. Like if you're good, you get paid more. And if you're excelling, you can really do an inventory of what your limiting factors are, and you can get paid more, but it's not guaranteed and it's not the safest play, but it might be the more rewarding. It's just hard for really anyone to determine that until they really get into it.
Yeah. And I think I always love the saying when I was in the restaurant business, too many people who know how to cook think they can open a restaurant. So it's really not the same thing just because, everybody loves your meatballs. That all of a sudden you should open up, Tony's Meatball Shop. But
I would tell everyone, like, we're 2019, like it was a huge peak for, basically boutique fitness, right? I mean, how many gyms registered?
Crazy.
Like 300,000. We're the modern day restaurant, right? Like people who like to work out open up now a gym. And like, I like to eat, so therefore I open up a restaurant in the 90s. Now it's like, I like to work out and exercise, so I'm going to open up my own gym. And you're competing with every single one of those folks. Like you look at SoulCycle, they're just marketing execs. They're good at getting people to like their product. It's a beautiful experience. They know nothing about exercise and fitness, and they brought in people who do. But man, their whole model is built around creating experience and what marketing and what sells. You don't know what it's like to compete against that. They are good at what they do. You're better at what you do than they are. But man, they're better at selling it, and you're going to lose unless you understand that value and understand that perspective. Like all these things that quote unquote you think you're elite or superior to because you're just better at coaching and programming and understanding physiology and biomechanics, etc. You're not competing in that. Like apples to apples, it doesn't matter to a customer out there. Like they can go where they want to go, and they're going to go to the place that feels like it's a better experience, better branding, better marketing, better overall, like enjoyable process, because this is Groundhog's Day in terms of general fitness. They keep coming 52 weeks a year. So there's this element of like, you need to have an enjoyable, rewarding experience as much as you get performance. So that process of like, there's no finality to this. Strength coaches really struggle with that. And opening up a gym and, like that, just the same thing as like opening up a restaurant. Like I like to cook. My wife tells me she loves my food. Like I'm not going to open up a restaurant. I don't know how to do that. I have no idea how to sell that product. I have no idea how to buy at scale, and I know that inherently now better than I did. But man, like, I don't think people really evaluate like where the modern day restaurant and, those statistics of pretty much 90% of small businesses fail. Like, man, why would gym businesses be any different? The only really hard part to evaluate is you might have to put up a lot more capital to open up a brick and mortar fitness facility. And, like you have to have a game plan and strategy of how you're going to recoup that investment as soon as you buy it. And as you look at, like, I'm buying a dozen eggs to sell at a bed and breakfast, I need to sell all a dozen of these eggs. What's my strategy to do that? Can I put a daily special or something? You need to figure out, I'm going to do group A strength training. Not only that, how can I sell it and how can I recoup my investment and pay off my actual operating budget? And that's the hard thing to process and evaluate. And you might need to not necessarily compromise, but find middle ground on what is attractive and what is appealing to the customer out there, as well as doing your best job of best practice and doing a really good job of applying a high level product.
Yeah. And I think we've seen the one thing that the pandemic And for some people, it's unfair. I think for California gyms, it's unfair to throw them into this one. Like we said, you're outside, you're able to do workout outside, but we've seen a lot of gyms closed who really probably should have closed. They didn't understand about cash flow. They don't understand about building a culture. They don't understand about a lot of these different things. And they were exposed when the shutdown happened. And I'm not wishing that on anybody. I'm just saying it's just the reality that, the strong do survive. And sometimes there's other circumstances. Like I said, LA County, they've been open for 3 weeks in the last year. That's nearly impossible to survive unless you can train outside, unless you can train people, like you have enough space to train somebody outside from your gym. So I think that's one thing that people have got to understand, is that this has exposed a lot of people, and hopefully people will kind of go into opening a gym with a little bit more, kind of a little bit more preparation and a little bit more thought, and getting some advice from people like you. But Tim, I just want to,
there's a point though you made there, the strong shall survive. When I think about evolution in obviously biology, but also businesses, and you look at the most adaptable is the one that survives. So you look at a situation like, we'll say, Results Fitness, and Rachel and Alan have built out how many years of, all right, we have all these different iterations of results-based fitness, from Results University to education to probably remote-based training. And you look at it as one silo of revenue starts to go away, you still have all this other revenue coming in from other areas. And if you ever read Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile, you look at the most fragile businesses are the ones with one vertical integration. There's that or nothing. So if all you have the ability to do is just do one thing and transition, or like things that you can't perceive as coming, like in a black swan, you're going to really struggle to adapt in a changing landscape, right? And to the point of that, like pandemic hits, you have to shut your doors. Do you have the bandwidth or the impetus to want to follow through and create more revenue coming in? And to that point, like, man, I call it the Great Fitness Purge of 2020. The ones that have one vertical integration and nothing else, and no other perspective on what they do and how to do it, as well as like to do that. Like, I didn't have that luxury. I got 10 people working here that we had to figure out creative ways to create revenue. And we went online, we did everything from Zoom workouts to whatever. But in between then and there, we worked our ass off to figure out different ways to engage with our customers, to find more revenue in. So I'm doing consults with other coaches out there left and right. We're doing all these different promotional things left and right. And just being an earner, being someone that can go out there and hustle and get different revenue streams in while your primary revenue's gone, like that's the difference, and that's the process too. And you see these places that came to that perspective of like, damn, man, like I can't do my business the way I want to do it. Screw it. I'll just close up. Like you just took away the shackles of small business and overhead and all the other things. Like, but you quit. You didn't fight. You didn't create creativity. Like, Results Fitness is still open because Alan and Rachel are probably really resourceful and figured out ways to create revenue when there's no direct revenue from their primary revenue stream in. And I think that process of, people that had the strong desire to stay open and push through and find creative ways to make money, man, as we start to go into 2021, hopefully that has this platform of those who stayed shall be champions kind of concept. And, we'll get this whole new bigger fish pond that we never had access to between Equinox, LA Fitness, Lifetime, because they may not be comfortable going back there and they want to go to Boutique. Like Boutique started after 2008, after the housing crash. And now all of a sudden we're on this next financial crisis. And what happens after that? Who knows? We can define the fitness industry from here on out, but you got to be resourceful and you got to be creative and find the revenue streams in.
Yeah. And then I like to say, we've been talking about this on the podcast, is, multiple diverse streams of revenue. So it's not just, don't let everything rely on the one thing. So for me, it was having StrengthCoach.com and BodyByBoyOnline.com as a revenue, and the Strength Coach podcast is another revenue, and some training is another revenue. So they don't really have it. So when the shutdown happened, all right, I lost a little training, but I had, the other stuff went up. increased, right? Because of what, the way I prepared it. So it's just one of those things. But I want to finish on this one. I had a client, Dan Silver, and he used to say to me, he was my second client ever at Equinox 2004, and he saw me grow and you know, from Equinox to my own thing into my own facility. And he used to say to me, "Ant, things are going pretty good right now, huh?" And I would say, yeah, they are going pretty well. He's like, "Well, listen, something's going to come and slap you right outside the head, and either it's going to knock you down. I'm telling you, you got to be prepared for it." He said, "It's always something. This is a roller coaster ride. It always will be." Every successful, and he sold his company at 52 years old, and he had been retired. He's been retired for almost 30 years now, just living off of. He sold his company to a big company and managed his money. But he said, as successful as he was, there was always something that came along. So if you think, oh, you know, once we open up, once the vaccine is here and blah blah blah, no, it's going to be something else, and you need to be prepared for it. So. Yeah.
And you could probably sense that was the organic development of getting your own thing going and building out StrengthCoach.com and the podcast. And you probably saw that foresight and said, okay, like if that does happen, what are some other revenue streams or other outlets that I have that I can continue to support myself and the people around me?
Yeah. Well, Tim, I just want to say, you know, look, this has been great. It's been a great conversation. We appreciate everything you've done on StrengthCoach.com, everything you've brought to the table for continuing that conversation on so many different topics on the site. So we really appreciate that. Love to see your success with Allegiate and everything else that you're doing, helping other strength coaches. So thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you. No, it's been awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of spread the word. One of the things I can continuously come back to is there a more efficient stream of communication? And you guys have such a great platform and such great connection to your audience. So essentially just trying to mitigate the same conversation over and over and over again. And I'm just going to send them to this, man. Like, hey, go check out that podcast I did with Ant. And I think that'll help you out a lot before we go into a conversation a little bit more in depth.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, Tim.
Thank you, Ant.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 304 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try StrengthCoach.com out for 30 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day answering questions. To access that offer, go to StrengthCoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Parrier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, the app is live. It has all of the virtual seminar series, as well as earlier presentations from the functional training summits. They just started the weekly webinar series. February 2nd, Carlos Santana does the first one. Train like a fighter without getting hit. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Tim Caron for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Thanks to Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Don't forget to go to their website to check them out. Use the referral code SHRINKCOACH to get started on a free 30-day trial. Thanks to Adam and Tim and TrainHeroic. Coach Boyle and I both use TrainHeroic to deliver all of our online training. Head over to TrainHeroic.com. Start your free 14-day trial. Thanks to Jenny Rearick of Fit to Speak. Check her out at fit2speak.com. That's fit-to-speak.com. Thanks to Kevin Carr and Brendon Rearick. Check them out at certifiedfsc.com. My name is Anthony Aranda. My new book, Be Like the Best, consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that'll help you be like the best. There's also the Be Like the Best workbook, which is the collection of all the Be Likes. Go to continuefit.com or belikethebest.com to check that out. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.